Howdy, everyone. Welcome. Hopefully you could relate a little bit with that intro video with having made some of those assumptions. Hopefully we're not always making all those assumptions at times, and we can fall into that trap way too often, I'm sure. But I'm Doug Cothe. I'm here, People Smart Group founder and principal consultant, and also with the Organizational Health Collective, the founder and member, and here with my good friend Terry.
Hey, I'm Terry Wager, Dr. Terry Wager, clinical and organizational psychologist, and my company is Generator Consulting and part of the collective. And it's a great group of people who are really focused on bringing organizational health to organizations that want to have better culture and better people and better outcomes.
Yep. Absolutely. And so if you're a consultant out there and looking for a group to help sharpen your tools, and also a group to help work alongside of to grow and be encouraged and all of that, check us out. We'd love to have you come on along. And if you're a business owner out there and you need some help, we're here to kind of talk about these topics and help out as we can here. But also we regularly dive into those between our two companies and others that we know within the collective. So we'd love to help you. In the meantime, we are going to dive in today, based on that intro video, into the ways in which we communicate and the problems we have with it, and the root of that. So oftentimes is assumptions that we make, right, Terry?
Absolutely. It's funny how quickly we do that. I'll tell a quick story and then we'll get into it. And when I was in my doctoral program, I was writing paper after paper after paper, and one of my professors started circling things in the paper when I handed it to them, and they put who, what, where, and handed it back to me, and I was like, I thought I answered those. I thought that they would know what I was talking about. And I sat down and talked to her, and she was like, what you're doing is very common. You're thinking that your readers have all of the knowledge that you have. Mm-hmm. And in this paper, you've lost me every time you start going into something because you have all of the knowledge, but you didn't share it with me. Mm-hmm. And it was really right on track with this idea of assumptions. Is like, not everybody has the same information that I do. And so when I start writing or talking, I have to think about, do they have the information or not?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we all tend to assume quickly that everybody's on the same page as I am.
Because we all hear the same context, right? We're working in the same company. We're doing the same thing. I mean, we're all on the same team. We must all get it, right?
Absolutely. Makes sense.
Except for all that stuff in my head.
The way you put it. And here's another funny thing is, like, when I talk to them in my head about this, in my head they get it.
Right. Yep.
When I'm having the conversation among myself and them in my head, they totally understand what I'm talking about. So why aren't they doing what I suggested in real life?
Exactly. They should get it. I said it, right? I said it clear. Exactly. I was fine, right? I understood. That goes with, they understand what I told them, right? Because it made sense to me. So There's two of our assumptions right there. Well, it's clear to me. Why isn't it clear to them? It should be, right?
Absolutely. And so that is one of the assumptions is it's clear to me, so it should be clear to them.
Yeah. Yep.
And funny enough, often, there's two problems with that. One, we don't necessarily have all the information to have it as clear as we think we do.
Yeah. Yep.
And two, they don't have any of the information that we have in our head necessarily.
Right. Yep.
To actually have the clarity that we have, or they see it from a different angle altogether.
Yeah.
Then we're talking about the whole elephant thing. I don't know if you know the story of the elephant. Everybody's looking and touching a different part, and they're like, it's like this. No, it's like this. No, it's like that.
Yep.
And sorry, I'm not going to the joke. But the reality is we all have different perspectives. So the clarity is going to be very different for each person. Although I may be crystal clear on what I see, I don't see the whole picture.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was a movie, it might have been the 90s, I forget when it was, but called Crash, where it showed the different perspectives from different angles of different people. I mean, what a great example of all these different people saw the accident from a totally different perspective in a totally different way. And it took all of their perspectives to get the real perspective of what actually happened.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
What a great understanding leaders need, right? They need to understand, hey, my people are all coming from a little different angle, a little different perspective, a little different way of perceiving things. And if I don't accommodate for that, the message is going to get skewed, right? It's like I said in the intro on the written part, it's, hey, have you played the telephone game, right? How quickly does someone's perspective of what you said turn into something entirely different as we move down that line?
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to understand that one of the biggest reasons for conflict in meetings when we're actually entering the danger of conflict or adventure, as I like to say, the adventure of the conflict, it's to get that clarity by everybody saying what they're thinking rather than assuming everybody knows everything.
That's a great one. So there's an importance of feedback loops, isn't there?
Absolutely.
If you don't have those, you're never going to know what everyone else is thinking you said.
Absolutely. And I was referring earlier to the feedback loop as if I'm my own feedback loop, and actually I have a book called Quit Taking Your Own Bad Advice, which is exactly that idea of the feedback loop of me listening to me about me and my situations. And it never goes good if we don't have an outside interest bringing in other information.
Yeah. And so we say it and they should get it, right? I just have to say it once. There's that other assumption, right? It's like, hey, I said it. Okay, they should get it. But that feedback loop is a part of, hey, no, I need to continue to say it. And I need to refine how I say it over time so I make sure it's being understood correctly. And I think that comes in a gap where people think that communication and receiving communication, well, that's their problem, right? They're the listener. They should seek to understand. And if they don't understand, they should ask me, which is another one of our assumptions. It's like, no, if I want to communicate clearly, it's on me to make sure you get what I'm saying.
Right. I think what you're talking about is the idea of saying it one time and people treat it sometime as an event instead of a process.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And communication is not an event. It's a process.
Yep.
And we say it one time and I've seen it. Hey, I told you that one time. I told you that I already told you that.
Right.
Well, great. You said it, but again, was the clarity understood? Was it said when the person was paying attention?
Yep.
Okay, so Christine and I sometimes watch TV, and then she'll start talking to me while I'm watching the TV. And I'm very good at keying in on things and blocking other things out. And so she'll say something, and 4 words in, I'm like, huh?
Did you say something?
Realize she's actually talking to me. And it's not about trying to invalidate her or discourage her from talking to me. I just get locked in on stuff. I'm very, very good at locking in on something I'm paying attention to. So if you don't go, Terry, and then I go, what? Then I can hear it. But if I'm thinking about something else, and this applies in work and things too. If I'm applying my mind on a different issue and they start talking to me, I might not get it.
Yeah.
And so and there's been times in my past, I don't know if I ever do this now, but I sit there and play catch up trying to figure out if I know what they're talking about or I can get the gist of it rather than going, you know what? I was not listening. Can you say it again?
You mean
I attempt
you
to
don't
just
always give
tell them.
feedback and say, I didn't understand what you were saying?
Yeah, exactly. And so now I do put my hand up and go, you know what? I was not paying attention. It deserves the attention that you want for it. So can you start over and I'm here now.
which I assume for you has been a learned response, right? Over time, you're saying, hey, I want to understand.
I was
clearly.
born with that gift. Yeah, I have never had any problems with that. I'm just born with the gift. No, I had to learn it very, very, it was painstaking learning experience of being able to admit that I didn't hear, or I wasn't paying attention, or I wasn't, and some people have called me ADHD, which I don't know if it's true or not, but I do know that attention is difficult for me sometimes, especially if I'm focused on something I don't want to focus on. But yeah, it's something that I had to really learn and work on as a skill to stop, pay attention, take the information in, make sure that there's understanding in order to be able to give a clear answer.
And that takes a commitment level. I mean, you've got to say, okay, I'm committed.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna focus. I'm gonna do this. And so even there, as a team, it takes us growing in our commitment and being able to say, okay, we're going to commit to listening to one another well. We're going to commit to feedback, all of those things, which take developing the team, developing the trust, growing to a point where we have that level of confidence and communication that we're going to listen well. We're going to put away the cell phones. We're going to shut off the silly computer in the middle of a meeting, and we're going to actually listen to what you're actually saying. And then when I don't get it, which is usually going to be happening to most of the room, we're going to say, could you clarify? What I hear you saying is this. And so there's that active listening, reflective listening piece that actually has to be a really key piece of communication actually happening. And so for both the communicator and the receiver, there's got to be an interplay. There's got to be a back and forth, and there's intricacy to the whole stinking thing. It's just not this, A plus B equals C. No,
right.
We're done. We got it there.
Right. It is a process. And I think that the active listening, the reflection, and the curiosity to ask more and really clarify through questions is really important. And I don't think people do that enough. I was back in grad school, during lectures, I would be like one of the only people asking questions, and I'd be like, okay, I don't get it. I don't understand what you're talking about. I want you to explain it deeper or use a different example because I want to make sure I get it. And honestly, half the time it was because I wanted to just deepen the conversation. But part of the time it's because I'm sitting there watching other people like this, but they're not speaking up that they don't understand it.
Right.
And so it's amazing how people will not volunteer that they don't get it, either because they've checked out, because they've just stopped listening, which some people do, or they're embarrassed to say they don't understand what's going on.
Right.
And that feeling of embarrassment allows disconnection to be more important or take priority over understanding. Absolutely. And that's not okay when we're trying to actually do something together as a team. We need to prioritize understanding and let go of the fear of disconnection.
Yeah. And that fear and that not wanting to dive in grows the longer you go with it, right? So now all of a sudden we're 5 steps behind where I didn't understand, and now I'm really confused, and I really have no clue. So now I really don't want to say it because I'm really embarrassed. I don't want to go back, tell them I got to go back 5 steps because I didn't get the first step, let alone the second, third, fourth, and fifth. And so if we don't do it quick, if we're not willing to keep those quick accounts that says, hey, you know what? I didn't get it. If we don't throw our hand up right away and say, whoa, hold on. And if as a leader, we don't give people that opportunity when we're communicating and in a meeting, we're in trouble. Wow, wait till I get the whole thing out. No, if you get the whole thing out, I'm definitely not going to get it because I didn't get the first point.
Yeah, and sometimes there's it's fair that we got to listen for the end to be able to because I know for me I tell stories, and sometimes the end of the story is going to actually inform the beginning a little bit, and so I get that. That might be the hypnotist in me, I don't know, but and so there is some room for that, but I think that the bigger thing for the listener that's not understanding to really grasp is it's okay at the beginning if you're not sure to ask for context. It's also okay to, at the end, if you feel disconnected, to actually put your hand up and admit that, hey, I feel embarrassed, but I kind of got lost somewhere along the line. I'm not even sure where.
Yep. Yeah.
Can I get a recap, or even, and this is how I might do it, and this is kind of in the idea of the naked consultant, is like, okay, this is where I'm lost. Correct me if I'm wrong, or correct me if I'm off track. This is what I've heard, and this is what I was tracking. What did I miss?
Yep.
And then we can get more clarity around that. But unfortunately, people don't do that.
Yep. Well, oftentimes we prioritize our pride, right, over actual clarity. So I don't want to get clear about it because I'm afraid I might look stupid, or I might come across as I wasn't listening. Well, guess what? If I wasn't listening, I wasn't listening. Help. I need to actually hear that again if you really want me to do what you're asking me to do, or you want me to understand what you're asking me to understand.
Right. It's interesting on that one question. They understood what I told them. I actually, when I was in clinical doing therapy and things, I'd give assignments, or I'd give suggestions on for people to go and try, and then come back and not do it. And then they go and they still wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. And it looks like resistance, right? These people are treatment resistant. And the truth is I never actually, and I didn't realize it at the time, but they said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And then they'd go and do something completely different. And what I realized was I thought they understood what I told them.
Yep.
And what I had to start doing is I asked them, okay, now that I explained what I want you to do, you explain it back to me and tell me what I said.
Yeah.
And when I started doing that, lo and behold, what looked like treatment resistance, or them not, taking action the way they need to, they started doing what was suggested, because they understood what I was saying.
Yep.
And the other thing that I would often say, and actually I was just on a call with a client earlier, and I told them that I wanted to do this, and I go, and by the way, I want you to know that you're going to screw it up. And I, what? Well, yeah, because you've been in a pattern of doing things this way, and I'm asking you to do it this way now that's different.
Yep.
But your head and your pattern is going to come back in and try to keep doing it the same way and say the new way is stupid, it's not going to work. But I want you to try it anyway and realize you're going to have that battle in your head a little bit.
Yep.
And I was doing that so that they understood and they got clarity, and they didn't end up with an assumption that they're just not able to do it because they have that battle. And so I really went for, in fact, crushing that assumption that they're doing it wrong or it's not going to work, by telling them that there was going to be a battle in their mind of old pattern, new activity. And when I started doing that, people really started to be able to see the difference and realize that they're doing it right if they have resistance in themselves because of the old pattern.
Yep.
And so that's something that I suggest to everybody whenever we're introducing anything, to let them know that, hey, we know that the pattern's going to be. We know that this is a thing that we want to try to do, and it's going to be a mother to try to get the new way to do it in there.
Yep.
But let's try anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I think you bring up a really great point too, of to change anything, to grow in anything requires us what? It requires us the freedom to try something, to fail at it, to get feedback, to learn and grow, and then try it again.
Absolutely.
And have still some failings, but we're going to keep growing and growing and growing. It's not a hey, I tried it once and I was perfect. If all you're doing is things you try once and are perfect, well, then you're probably not getting very far.
Right. And I also love to suggest, instead of the person that's subjectively trying and failing and trying and succeeding or whatever in this subjective role of first person, move yourself to third person researcher and start living in the idea of doing experiments. And so we're going to experiment this, and we're going to watch the subjective part of us and see how it goes. And as an objective observer, we're going to be able to see more what's working and what's not working, and just live in the idea of exploring, experimenting, and experiencing the result, and then be able to make changes from more of this objective experimenter role while we're also living the subjective experience of it.
I like
and
it.
It sounds weird, but it works.
Yeah. And I think in this topic we're talking about today in communication, what a great tool as well, right? Because we oftentimes come in and we communicate and we think, okay, boom, that's done. As opposed to, guess what? This whole thing's a subjective experiment here of figuring out, is my message getting across? And so I've got to try saying it one way. If that didn't work, okay, we're going to tweak it. You're going to ask questions. We're going to do it a little differently. And I love that, the experts say that we need 7 communication and even 7, maybe different forms of those to communicate. But it's like, of course we do, but it needs to be a dialogue of what those forms are is the best version of it. I remember in my experience when I was back doing a ton of public speaking, one of those experiences as a pastor doing preaching. And I remember coming down after doing a speaking engagement, and I come, and at the back of the room, I'm talking to someone, and they're telling me what they got out of it, and there was nothing I said whatsoever. And I'm saying, where did you get that? And I'm like, okay, this communication failed miserably. And so just that one-shot deal just doesn't work. There's got to be room for, and so we got to have a dialogue about it, and we talked through what was really being communicated, and that helped. But if I never had that interaction, that person's stuck walking away thinking I said something, or that my entire focus was about something that it was not at all about. And we'd have been lost. We'd have missed.
Absolutely. It's so interesting, that phenomenon of delivering a bunch of words in some fashion designed to make a point, and people pull out a completely different point.
Yep.
Or they hear a completely different message.
Yep.
And it's the way I kind of put that is our ego actually commandeered the announcement or the message or whatever, and we used it in a way that was not intended.
Right. Yep.
And we have to, as listeners, actually be paying attention to the fact that we're going to interpret things, and we're going to make connections that the speaker may not have even attempted to make. And sometimes they're good, and sometimes they're way off base. Yep. I think about, the idea of the girl asking if she looks good in the clothes, and it's like, uh-oh, now we're set up because we have to wait a minute.
I can't win here.
And using that example, but there's all kinds of different examples out there that, well, are you saying I'm fat? Are you saying this? Are you saying that? No, I'm not saying that at all. Those are the things that you thought,
right,
based on what I said. And this is also, it's kind of weird that this is a lot of what I talk about in my book, Quit Taking Your Own Bad Advice, on Amazon. But the idea is we have a filter inside of us, and that filter is protecting us. And so it's a protective filter, and it takes in all of the information and turns it into what we know how to deal with, or turns it into our pattern of protecting ourselves. And so we're looking for how whatever words you're saying fit in with how I need to protect myself. And so I turn the messages that are being spoken into what I already knew.
Yep. Yeah.
Which is a very big bias, by the way. Yeah. And it's really actually detrimental to growth of any project or any person. But what happens is we take the information in, and the other person's assuming they're getting their message across. Meanwhile, the other person's getting resentment as it's spoken.
Yeah.
And there is no communication.
No.
Because what really happened was Doug told me something, but me, Terry, listened to my own ego's version of it, interpreted it, changed it. I spoke to myself while Doug was speaking, and then I'm reacting to what I told me instead of what Doug told me. And then we can't figure out why things don't work.
I'm just reinterpreting you, Terry, for confirmation bias. That's all. As long as you're confirming everything I believe about me and the world, we're good. I don't need you
Absolutely.
to say anything else. I mean, don't get outside that box of how I know everything, because otherwise,
Absolutely. And the funny thing is we can see that with people who actually are kind of stuck in projects or stuck in whatever they're doing. And I'm not saying the ego is a bad thing. I'm saying that's an interpreter
yeah,
for protection. And
yeah,
sometimes it's good, but a lot of times it's protecting when we don't need it.
yeah,
And so we have to be able to pay attention to that as ourselves as listeners, but we also are doing that as leaders. And we have to pay attention to when we trigger people's protection or we trigger our own protection or the way people are listening, they check out and then, well, now I'm mad. And so as a leader and I'm upset, my message is going to come out wonky. And so we got to pay attention to all of that. It is exhausting
yep,
if we don't realize some of these things. And that's why a lot of people don't like meetings. It's why a lot of people try to avoid conversations. And hey, let's just agree to disagree. That's called avoidance,
yeah, yep, yep,
right?
yeah,
I hear that from people, and I'm like, I will not ever dive into an agree to disagree conversation. I want to enter the adventure of understanding what you're saying.
yeah,
And I would love it if you were able to hear what I'm saying and understand where I'm coming from. And after we both understand that, then we can make an informed decision, or
yep,
at least understand where the other person's coming from and honor that. But
yes,
we don't have to agree to disagree. That doesn't make any sense in reality. I mean,
right,
it's an
right,
oxymoron that should really just stay on the moron side of things. But and that's my opinion. I probably just pissed a lot of people off, but we'll
hey,
agree to
that's
disagree.
right. You know, I love it. Oh man, yep. And it's just so interesting how much that brings out again those intricacies of communication. That it's not just a simple process, but we treat it like it is. And when we do that, we're going to mess it up. That we're guaranteed, because there's no way if you're going to treat it simplistically that it's going to happen. It also brings me back to our conversations about meetings, because again, why do I need a meeting that actually matters to the people that are in it, that has purpose, that has value, that has some drama and conflict and engagement to it? Well, because I want people to pay attention. I want people to be actively listening to what's going on in the meeting and not focused on their cell phone, focused on their email, focused on whatever else it is. I want them to be engaged. And so we need to have meetings that are engaging, and we need to show up to engage at a meeting so that we're actually in that place of a good listener and that good place of a good communicator, and we're actually doing the hard work. We need energy for that.
Absolutely.
We need focus for that. We need commitment for that. And if we don't have it, it's not going to happen. We're going to miss each other.
Yeah, it's funny because an assumption that you didn't write down in the beginning of this that occurred to me is you said it. Actually, it didn't occur to me. You actually said it. Is communication's easy?
Yep.
That's an assumption.
Yes.
And it's an assumption that gets us in trouble because communication isn't easy. It's not hard, but communication is something to be paid attention to and really checked in with. And like I said, communication is a process.
Yep.
And I don't think people really pay attention to the fact that we are in a process. When we get into a meeting, we're in a process of connecting dots and connecting ideas and connecting in order to move forward somewhere. And for that, we need to be able to understand where everybody's at and understand what everybody's thinking, and also what people's blockages are, or where they're stuck, or where they're not sure about things. And the emotional part too is like, where are you feeling discouraged? Where are you feeling encouraged? Where are you feeling disconnected? Where are you feeling misunderstood?
Yep.
And when we can actually address that stuff, we start to actually come together and work together much better. I've actually been diving into a little bit as I'm launching a little deal called emotional influence. And what I'm talking a lot about when I'm talking about this is the idea that emotion is the thing that actually connects us together much more than logic. And everybody loves to live in logic, but logic is argued, right?
Yep.
And we can argue logic. And so it's very hard to sway somebody logically.
Yep.
But when we understand how emotion works and we understand how to speak to people emotionally, that's a very, very strong, influential place. And people don't use emotion enough. They play on emotion, but they don't use their emotion.
Right.
And so playing on emotion is very different than using it.
Yes. That's good. I like that. We'll have to explore that more in another episode at some point here, because that sounds like a good one. But yeah, I mean, I love what you're saying there. And I think what people want, right, is, oh, you mean we're not cyborgs that just show up and you say, I say, and it's this one level transaction, right? We want transactional communication, when the reality is I show up as a whole person, you show up as a whole person. So your emotions come into play. What went on before you came to work comes into play. What went on a week ago might come into play. What's going to happen after the meeting is coming into play. Everything is there as a whole person to impact how well am I listening? How well am I understanding? All of that stuff. And if we're not aware of that, then we're missing. We're not going to communicate well. And so that reality of, hey, how are we coming in matters. I mean, how are you walking into a meeting makes a big difference.
It really does. It really does. So when we're really looking at this, how do we start to remove, and I mean, we've answered this over and over and over, but let's get concise and clear on the end of this as we're coming to the end. How do we beat the assumptions, if that's such a thing?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And obviously we've talked about a few different categories within here. One is clarity, right? And not assuming clarity is just communication one way, it's two-way, right? We need so communication, we need clarity with feedback, and we need to know from the feedback that what is being said is getting across clear. So that was a big one that we continually touched down on, and then two is, again, that it's a process. It's not an event. It's not a transaction. It is a process of communication to make sure that clarity is happening and clarity is getting across. And what I want to say is actually being heard and understood. And so even hearing needs to then take the next level of understanding and then application. I mean, there's so much engaged and involved in it that we've got to walk a process. I love your picture of, let's pull out and think of ourselves as this is an experiment, and we're kind of sitting both in it and next to it, and we're watching, okay, is this actually happening, that what's being said is being heard, and we're getting understanding, and we're getting to the point where we can apply it, and we're all on the same page. And I think as I back out that comment and we're all on the same page, I think there's a bigger picture as well of, are we committed to be on the same page? Because if we're not, we're in trouble right there.
I just had the idea of we're all on the same page. We're all on page 26, but I'm in the wrong book.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait a minute.
Why are we in this book? Oh wait, they were into a whole working genius thing on Wonder, right?
Right. Yeah, and so I also think clarity is really important, and it's a process. But it also being able to tell on yourself is really important, and say, I'm lost in this. Yes. And being able to step in and reorient in the conversation if you're lost.
Yep.
And I think that's super important on both sides, because the assumption, there's an assumption on the listener's part of the view that the leader or whoever's saying it doesn't want to hear or doesn't have time for little old me to ask the question or something like that. And so just as important for the listener to be able to take responsibility for making sure that they get the message clear as well. And so like we said, it's a process, but it's a process not for someone to do to someone else, but it's an interactive, real working together, collaborative process of, Doug, you're saying something to me and I don't understand, as Terry understand what you're saying. So I want to clarify, and then it be a back and forth reciprocal conversation, not just a declaration of information. And that's what I think is really kind of important, is assumptions are going to happen. And so we need to, just like bias. So we need to confront the assumption and confront the bias. And it's okay to be what is it, Captain Obvious, and be, so what you just said is this. Yes, this is what did you mean this? And be more, we call it Detective Bell. There's a show called Elementary. And it's about Sherlock in New York or whatever. I can't remember where they are, but this guy, Detective Bell, we believe that he was in every scene to bring context back in for the watcher by kind of running down the scenario. And it's the Detective Bell. And it's like, I don't think enough people do that in real life to get everybody back on the page. It's annoying in the show when you notice that he's doing it every time. But at the same time, when we're in meetings or we're making big decisions for our business or what, or team decisions, I think it's really important to have a Detective Bell in there, bringing up this thing and saying, hey, this is kind of where we're at now. Go ahead with what you were thinking and how does it fit?
Yeah, that's good. A few reflections I have as I listen to you talk, Terry, is one, to communicate is a relational reality, not just
Absolutely.
a transactional reality. And that's where things like email and text and those things get us off course pretty quickly and pretty easily with bigger things that need more processing and more conversation. If you want to pass a fact along like, hey, we made X amount of money this year, fine, send it in an email or a text. If you want to have a decision-making ability and you want to actually engage or you want to cast vision, and this leads to my second part, is the more important the interaction is and the more important the communication is, the more contact we probably need. And so we can have that process and make sure it's getting through.
I know we're getting long on time here, but
Yeah.
I have a very good example of that. Is I'm actually examining some P&Ls for a business that I'm looking at right now, and there's a couple of different ways to look at P&Ls and look at what the business is actually making. But P&Ls a lot of times are going to taxes, and so these P&Ls are very, very difficult to understand based on what they're doing, because they're writing off a lot of stuff and they have a lot of things in their essential things that they're paying that are basically making their net look worthless.
Yep.
Or like the business is taking a loss. And so the person who sent me these P&Ls said, if you want to have a discussion about these numbers, I think it would be a good idea because there's more to the story than just these numbers.
Yep.
And I swear, if I looked at those numbers, that is a bad business.
Yeah.
But if you look at the cash flow from the explanation that they have, it's actually a pretty good business.
Wow.
And so when you're looking at that is a very good example of the idea of businesses are paying attention to how to use their money and use the financial system of the world to remove some of the tax burden legally.
Yep.
But at the same time, if you're going and looking at it as an acquisition, you need the full story, and you can't just assume that those numbers are correct.
Yep. Yeah, just because they're a tax deduction doesn't mean it's actually cash off the books.
Absolutely. And so this is a particular easy monetary kind of idea, but often it's the same thing in a verbal conversation around decision making too. We don't have all of the facts. We only have facts that we can really come to mind or say off the top of our head or whatnot, but there's more to it. And we want to get into the more to it piece.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great example. I appreciate that, Terry. That's a good one to bring out. And wow. So we need clarity, we need repetition, we need feedback, we need a process. And the more important and the more intense the information, we need to actually get face-to-face, and we need to get in more feedback, more contact. And the last piece I'll throw out there for meetings is something we use very often as well, is at the end of a meeting, it's always a good idea to stop and ask the questions. Okay, what did we decide? Who do we communicate that to? Well, first, what do we communicate? Who do we communicate it to? And then what do we not communicate? Because we're not ready yet. We're not there. We haven't figured that all out yet. And so those kinds of processing things, as you put, your Detective Bell, you need a Detective Bell at the end of the game to be able to say, hey, okay, where are we at here? What do we decide? What are we communicating? What are we not communicating? And who needs to hear it? And so that we're on the same page and we're passing that stuff along to the right people in the right ways. And we're all agreeing to what's being said.
Absolutely. One I'd throw in there with that is, when are they going to hear it?
Yeah, good. I like it.
And so when are we rolling it out? What is the timeline?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's phenomenal.
Yep.
So again, we all know what they say about assumptions.
Absolutely. We won't repeat it here.
We're assuming that you do.
If you don't look it up, you'll figure it out pretty quick. But let's not make those assumptions, folks. Let's do a great job communicating. And if you need help with that, we would love to help you or help one of our friends to help you. So reach on out. Great to have you here, and we are looking forward to being with you next week at the same time, same place. So thanks, Terry. It's been fun.
Absolutely.